Welcome, everybody. This is Josh Reeves, and I am here with my long awaited Bohemian Rhapsody film review. I know many of you out there have been waiting with anticipation for my review, my full review of the complete film. And I've got lots of emails over the past couple of weeks. Being that the film came out in Europe and in the UK a full week before we got here in the United States, I was inundated with emails from listeners wanting my take on it because they weren't aware that it wasn't coming out until then. I can tell you, I got a lot. I mean, I got like 50 emails about this thing, And now that I've seen it, I have to apologize because when I talked about it on the show after getting all these emails, I was like, hey, give me a chance to see it first. Then I'll tell you all about it once I've seen it. But now that I've seen it, now I understand why I was getting so many emails about it while people were freaking out, wanting to know what I think about it. And yeah, here we are. That's what the purpose of this video and this episode is. So first off, I want to say, as is probably already, many of you are probably already aware, just hearing me talk about it on the show. Queen is one of my is probably. I mean, it's hard to say. People ask me that. People say what my favorite band of all time is. It's really tough, man. It's really tough because I could throw Queen, Rush, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin. I could throw all those in very easily at the number one spot, and it's really a real tough tie for me for number one between Queen and Rush. And it's hard to put either one of those at number two either. So for me, that's always kind of been the two-way tie. It's kind of been, but there's tons of them. I love tons of other bands. But the thing about Queen for me was they were the first band that, they were what got me into music, period, when I was a kid. Because growing up and being a kid in the 80s, man, even then, and I did have, believe it or not, I did have taste even then. And, not a lot of the music that I heard, current music that I heard at the time when I was a kid, it just didn't do it for me. I wasn't into, it was the 80s, man. I still don't like a lot of 80s music, even though I like more of it now than I did then. You know what I mean? There's more 80s music I like now and appreciate more now than I did then. And, yeah, it was, I can remember. And the weird thing is that Queen seemed to always pop up a lot when I was a kid. In fact, I have memories of Queen even before I even really knew who they were. Because I can remember, it was weird. It was like it was like it was meant to be, because there was all these things that kept popping up. Like when I was like a little kid, even before Live Aid, I remember being at my aunt and uncle's house with my cousins in the early 80s. We're talking like probably 81, maybe 82, somewhere in there. And I can remember watching the movie Flash Gordon, I think on HBO or something, for the first time. And that would have been my first exposure to Queen music. But also, I remember before that, I remember riding around with my mom. I think she had like a Camaro or something. And I can remember hearing Another One Bites the Dust on the radio when it was new. When it came out, that was like 80. So I was like 4. And I can remember that distinctly. And then I remember when I was a kid, I remember seeing, I remember my dad we went over to his friend's house on a weekend one time, and they were all partying, they're just like stuck in front of the TV or whatever. And it was back when they had like, back in the early days when they first had the pay-per-view movies coming out, and you could like just push a button or whatever and you get a brand new movie or whatever. So my dad's friend was like, "Hey, you can get one of these movies or whatever." So I got a movie, and I watched Revenge of the Nerds, and at the very end, of course, you get We Are the Champions at the end of that. And then fast forward a few years, the movie Highlander comes out. I watched that. Queen music's all through that. That was actually after Live Aid, but yeah, Live Aid was the thing for me. I remember it happened in the summer. It seemed, when you're a kid and stuff, especially when you're talking about something that happened 30-something years ago, stuff seems to, in your memory, sometimes seems to happen right on top of each other. And it was, but I always associate Live Aid with my birthday. Because it seemed like, looking back on it, it seemed like it was a few days after my birthday, so it seemed like it happened right around that time. And MTV had been on MTV started, see, we didn't get MTV in Dallas here until like, it had already been on air for about 3 or 4 years before it ever came to Dallas. I remember when it first came to Dallas when I first moved to Mesquite, Texas when I was a kid, like 83, around the time my little brother was born. And I can remember, being very much MTV at that time, but always, I never got into the synth pop or really any of that stuff. And most of the music that I have been exposed to up to that point had either come from MTV or had come from the stuff that I'd heard, parents listened to or heard on the radio or stuff. You guys remember that? You got to remember this is before classic rock radio was a thing. Classic rock radio didn't become a thing until the late 80s and the early 90s. So there weren't radio stations that were playing music from a certain time period, specifically from the 70s and stuff back then. And, most of the stuff I had heard up to that point, I wasn't really into, but I remember hearing this thing about Live, because I remember when before Live Aid, you got to remember before Live Aid, the thing was the Band-Aid single. Remember that? Feed the World. Let them know it's Christmas time. And that song is forever burned into my memory because I guess it came out like Christmas '84, something like that. The school I was going to, in the town I was going to, there was a tornado, and I remember them saying, "No, this is not a drill." Everybody, we just go out in the hall and do the tornado thing where you get down, and they were like, "This is not a drill. This is an actual tornado going on." It didn't come near my school, but it did hit another school not far from there, and I remember it destroyed the playground. I remember I did this drawing of like a tornado hitting destroying a playground and stuff. And I guess that song had just come out, so I don't know why it's burned into my memory, because I think I just had it in my head, and maybe I heard it that day or something of the tornado, or it came out that day. I can't remember, maybe even it came out that day. So every time I hear that song, man, it's almost like a trigger response. I can remember. I just immediately remember the tornado, and I remember it being around Christmas when that came out. And then the following year was when they had Live Aid, and I remember it being such a big deal because it was the first time. You got to remember, satellite technology and broadcast technology was in its infancy back then. There was nothing. It was a big deal. People were freaking out about it. More people were tuning in because of it being a worldwide event than they were even for the bands who were on it. And so I can remember when I saw Queen, but here's the thing, I don't know if I definitely saw Launch Live Aid live as it was happening on July 13th, 1985. But because of the time difference, so you had simultaneous concerts going on in at Wembley Stadium and at JFK or RFK or whatever stadium it was in Philadelphia. So there was a time difference. MTV was showing going back and forth. They were showing stuff up to the point the one in Philadelphia started. They were going back and forth. I remember the whole Phil Collins Concorde fucking thing. I remember all that distinctly. I distinctly remember the Concorde thing. You know, where Phil Collins played at Wembley and then got on the Concorde and flew to fucking Philadelphia and played, and then played drums with Led Zeppelin for the Led Zeppelin reunion, and they fucking blamed it all on him for it sucking. And actually, honestly, if you watch it, and they really have made, there's, if you'll notice, you can't ever find really any super duper high quality versions of the Led Zeppelin reunion at Live Aid with Phil Collins on drums. There's a reason why you can't find that, because Led Zeppelin has blocked that because of how terrible it is, and they subsequently blamed it again and again on Phil Collins. And honestly, if you watch it, I know it's, you know, Phil Collins is pretty much universally hated. I don't hate Phil Collins. I actually think he's a great drummer. He did some shit fucking songs, you know. Well, so he had some fucking stinkers, but, you know, he had a few good songs. But regardless of that, if you actually have seen the footage of Live Aid with the Led Zeppelin reunion, it wasn't him. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't him. He was not the reason it sucked. The reason it sucked was, number one, Robert Plant sounded like dog shit. He couldn't sing the fucking songs. Jimmy Page was fucked up beyond all recognition. And on top of that, they had some black dude up there playing drums at the same time as Phil Collins. And he, if you watch it, especially being, you know, me being a drummer, I know this. If you watch it, it's the guy, this rando black guy. I don't know who he was. And it wasn't like fucking Omar Hakim or anybody, you know, like that. No well-known black drummer or anything. But they, for whatever reason, I don't get that. They had another guy up there. They had Phil Collins on one set, and it was his, you know, it was his regular kit, like the one he used in Genesis stuff, the left-handed Gretsch kit with the fucking, you know, those big toms. And some black dude, and that's what it was. This black guy had no business. He wasn't playing Led Zeppelin beats. In fact, the guy probably never even heard Led Zeppelin. And you could see Phil Collins kind of looking at this guy. He's trying to get him to follow him. That he was the reason, and on top of all the other things. But anyway, regardless, yeah, I you know, the Live Aid Queen thing was not only the moment for me when I was like, oh, you know, it was just something unlike anything I'd ever heard before, but it also, you know, caused a huge revival in their music and whatnot. But anyway, I just wanted to preface this because I know we get people who listen sometimes, so, you know, especially when it comes to a review on Queen and on this movie. And there's already been a lot written and a lot said about this film. I just want to be clear here that Queen, I'm not just I've been a lifelong Queen fan, believe me. I've got the fucking scars and I mean, you wouldn't believe the shit I put up with in high school and stuff, man, because I always had, you know, I had those transparent notebooks, like the binders, you know, it had like a Ziploc pouch on the front and you could put pictures and shit in there. So I always had fucking, you know, one of those, and it was always had Queen shit in it front to back. And so, of course, you know, I got the usual fag, and you listen to that fag band, blah, blah, blah shit, you know, forever. And it actually was a great story because I'll never forget, I got called a fag for so many years just for simply liking Queen. And I remember when I first, you know, kind of had my first real girlfriend or whatever, that I came to school one time and I was just destroyed with hickeys, dude. And like the seniors like saw this shit, and they fucking like stood me up in front of the whole school in at lunch. And they're like, this is Josh Reeves, blah blah. You know who he is, Look at his neck. Look at these fucking hickeys, man. Look at this picture of his hot girlfriend on his notebook. Look, this guy's getting more ass than all of you seniors put together. These are like football guys who are like, look, I hear anybody else call this guy fag or say more shit about him because he likes Queen War. I would whoop all your ass. And not only that, but to remind you, this motherfucker's getting more than you are. And I never got fucked with ever again. That was it. Holy shit. It was like, I mean, it's fucking terrible now in retrospect, but it's hilarious. Because I never got fucked with ever. It was like he shamed them. He was like, look, I mean, I was covered too. I was covered in fucking hickeys, dude. I was fucking, yeah, I was getting some for sure. Like, this motherfucker gets more than all y'all put together. It was hilarious. One of the funniest fucking things that ever happened to me the whole time I was ever in school was that. That was like one of the fucking top 3 funniest things that ever fucking happened. Hilarious. I remember I saw Brian May at the Majestic Theater in Dallas, October 17th, 1993. I mean, I remember the day, I remember everything. And on his first solo album tour. And it was incredible. It blew me away. And it's still one of the top, even though by this time I've seen everybody. I've seen everybody. I need that t-shirt. It says, I might be old, but I've seen all the cool bands. That's me. I've seen all the cool bands. And that still was, it was just one of the most amazing experiences ever. And I'll never, I remember going to school the next day and having the t-shirt on. So yeah, I mean, listen, I've been a lifelong Queen fan. I've studied this band. A lot of the stuff with them ties into my research and whatnot. It's like I've talked about on the show. And I think I'm just going to have to now, instead of, because we're going to try to have some little stuff, a little bit of stuff in Volume 3, at least some of the stuff about Freddie Mercury, but there's so much. I'm thinking about maybe doing just like I did with the Bowie thing, doing just like a Queen Freddie Mercury mini film thing sometime, at some point, I don't know. Anyway, let's get into, I just want to preface that before I get into anything about this film, because I got a lot to say about this film. That's why I wanted to do this as its own standalone thing and not just in the part of the regular radio show, I just want to say, listen, I'll put any amount of money you want to put on it. You will not find, I wouldn't say this about very many subjects. I definitely wouldn't say it about too many subjects as far as the conspiracy stuff and the stuff I usually talk about, because I don't want to sound braggadocious or anything, but really, seriously, you won't find anybody. I challenge you to find anybody that knows more about Queen than me. Honestly. And as I told you on the show, look, I already knew what we were dealing with here. I knew we were going to be dealing with historical revisionism. That was apparent to me. Well, there were some hints to that in the trailer. Or shall I say trailers, the multiple trailers that came out. There were hints to that. Stuff like Freddie, crowd surfing, going up on hands, riding across, never happened. They admitted that, that never happened. But of course, for dramatic effect and, for stuff, you have to do things like that. I get it. Other thing in the trailer is that they showed that ultimately didn't make it into the final cut of the movie, which I'm glad it didn't, because I saw this in the trailer and I was like, what? Brian May never used a bow, like a violin bow, Jimmy Page style. Brian May never used a violin bow. And neither John, there was a clip, and John Deacon was playing a fucking Rickenbacker bass. John Deacon never played a Rickenbacker bass on anything. He should have. Those things growl like a motherfucker, man. That's the best Rush stuff is the stuff where, and most of the Rush stuff up until I think, oh gosh, probably up until I want to say Grace Under Pressure. Everything up to Signals is pretty much all the Rickenbacker bass. And then he switched to using those ridiculous, they look ridiculous, but I mean, I get it. They were, at the time, they were kind of space age with those Steinberger headless guitars and basses. You know, they don't have a headstock on them with the tuning pegs like a normal one's just cut off because you tune it all down at the bridge. And I get it. You know, it was the early 80s. Everybody was into the new technology. Those were different because, not just because they look different because of the headstock thing, but because they were made out of graphite instead of wood. And they had active electronic pickups in them. So they were, you know, kind of futuristic. So, but he didn't stay with the Steinberger headless very long. And then after that, he started using the wall basses. They went back to using, he used the precision bass too a lot. Not the precision bass, the jazz bass a lot during the 70s in combination with the Rickenbacker bass. But it just had, the growl and tone of those things. But in the trailer for the Bohemian Rhapsody, there's a clip where they show John Deacon playing a fucking Rickenbacker, like Geddy Lee bass, using a bow on it, and Brian May using a bow on his guitar. I mean, he never did that. Never happened. And when I got the soundtrack before I saw the movie, they had the song Don't Stop Me Now revisited. That's what it says, revisited. I talked about this on the previous shows. And again, knowing all the information I know about Queen, I know the whole story of that song. That was one of the first songs where, you know, there you started to see, well, it was a contentious thing because Freddie did not want, that was the first song. Queen had really done everything up to that point as a unit. Even people who had individual songs, the complete band worked on every single song, no matter who wrote it. That was that was the first song where it was a distinctively different thing. It was almost like a Freddie solo song in the middle of a Queen project. And by that time, Freddie was starting to kind of grow tired of rock music and specifically Brian's guitar. So he didn't want Brian May's guitar on that song at all. And Brian wasn't even there for the sessions or anything. He basically, you know, came in and did some, you know, a little bit of guitar stuff on it later. But he had originally had a bunch of big chords and stuff in there. Freddie axed all that, didn't want any of that. So on the soundtrack, it was a big thing. I've heard Brian talk about it for years. Brian said many times that Don't Stop Me Now is his least favorite song that Queen ever did. He's been on the record many times through the years dogging that song and talking about how it's one of his least favorite songs because of the fact that Freddie didn't let him play guitar on it. So on this revisited version, all the guitar Freddie didn't want on it, Brian has taken it upon himself now that Freddie's not here to argue with it and put all the guitar on there. They re-recorded the drums. So before I even saw the movie, I was sitting there going, yeah, okay. This is not a good sign. It's clear what this is going to be. It's clear this is going to be historical revisionism. Before I even saw the film at all, I knew we were going to be dealing with at least some of that. But again, it's a Queen movie. I went into the film with the best attitude. I told myself that, look, I know it's going to have historical revisionism in it. I know it's a Hollywood movie. I know it's entertainment. I know it's not a documentary. I get all that. I know that you're going to have to be some things that you're going to have to flare up for drama or whatever, I guess. But still, I had an open mind. I was willing to watch it. But here's the thing. You know, I've seen this historical revisionism specifically from Brian May for a long time. And let me say, I am only a huge Queen fan, but Brian May is my all-time favorite guitar player. He's my all-time favorite number one guitar hero. I worship at the altar of Brian May. I always fucking have, unapologetically, and I always will. But he's a historical revisionist when it comes to Queen. And I've seen this for years in interviews, because, again, I've listened to every interview, man. Every interview, everything that they've done. Individual band member interviews from every member. I mean, I've heard them all. And the one thing I can tell you is that Brian May, since Freddie died, the main thing that he's been historically revisionist about was his relationship with Freddie. And he's made it out, in the years since Freddie's died, he's made it out as if him and Freddie were the best of friends. And that's just not the case. Not the case at all. In fact, they were at odds, well, up until the point when they started, right after Freddie got his AIDS diagnosis in April of 1987, not right before fucking Live Aid in 1985 like they depict in this movie. And I think then they got close as a band in like 88, 89, the Miracle album, then the Innuendo album, and the stuff that they recorded later that eventually became the Made in Heaven album, which they finished up and put out after he died. But before that, for many, many years, Brian and Freddie were, and there's recordings of them arguing, and they were not close at all. Roger and Freddie were really close because they were friends before any of the music stuff, which, of course, they don't depict in the film, or don't even hint at. Freddie and Roger used to have a secondhand clothes stall in Kensington Market in London before Queen was together. And they knew him because Freddie was friends with Tim Staffel, who was the singer in Roger and Brian's band Smile. So Freddie already knew. I mean, in the movie, they depict it like, like, oh, our singer quit. Imagine this. Imagine this. Your singer quits, right? And with not even 5 minutes after he quits, the next guy that walks up and wants the job is Freddie Mercury. I mean, come on. No, that's the reason he even approached it. Freddie was in bands before Smile and before Queen, of course, but they don't, again, no mention of that in the film. But yeah, I mean, so my point is historical revisionism. Again, I was quite prepared for the fact that this was going to have, dramatized stuff in it. I didn't have a problem with that, and I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with are blatant and absolute lies, and this film is littered with them from front to back, ladies and gentlemen. Front to back. God damn it, I wanted to love this movie. I wanted to love it. My criticisms and things I have to say about this film have nothing to do with anything other than, again, I don't have a problem with history. You can change, you got to change things here and there, blah, blah, blah. But my argument is that when it comes to the story of Queen and Freddie Mercury, you don't. My God, the stuff that they didn't mention and didn't talk about in the story of Freddie and Queen would have made a much more compelling movie than what they made. Now, let me say this. The last 20 minutes of the film, the Live Aid section of this film, is incredible. The last 20 minutes of the film and the Live Aid section, it is incredible. It is stunning. It's really fucking. I mean, it's just really incredible. It really is a technological marvel to see what they did, especially in recreating Wembley Stadium to such detail. The old Wembley Stadium. The old Wembley Stadium's not even there anymore. There's the new Wembley Stadium in its place. And but just the detail in which they recreated that, and how well they recreated the performance of the band. The live performance sections in the film are pretty good. They should have focused more on that, but the main thing is that it's just the way the story's told, and the out and out lies, and the way that they move things around on the timeline, in ways that didn't happen at all. Listen, a lot of people don't give a shit about any of that stuff. There are a lot of people, a lot of great reviews. I have to say, this is the first time I've ever seen the critics for a movie be right. But it's funny to see the way the Queen camp is spinning it. I saw a post on Facebook, I think it was yesterday, saying something to the effect of, this is the year the critics are wrong or whatever. Honestly, I have to tell you, the critics are 100% right. All the reviews I've read about the film so far are 100% right. But it just goes to show you that, just like I've always said and talked about many times, the general public, they don't give a fuck about the truth. They don't give a shit about the truth. They want whatever condensed, easily digest. I mean, it really. I had tissues with me. I expected, because I expected I was going to be crying like a fucking baby from beginning to end of this thing. I really did. That's what I anticipated. Boy, was I ever wrong. I mean, again, I can deal with inaccuracies. Listen, if anybody out there is working for a major film studio, and you have a fucking grudge to kick 20th Century Fox, doesn't Disney now own them now? Great. Kick them right in the fucking nads. Listen, I can make twice as good a movie for half the price that would sell twice as much. Any movie studio out there wants to give me a shot, give me a call. Let's do a real Queen movie. I mean, Act 1. This is the first thing you see when you watch this movie. The first fucking thing you see is Freddie waking up in bed the day of Live Aid coughing. Like, yeah, let's drive that AIDS thing home immediately. Again, he didn't even find out about his AIDS diagnosis until April of 1987. In the movie, Queen is rehearsing for Live Aid, and when they get done rehearsing for Live Aid, he tells them he has AIDS, and he says, "Guys, I have AIDS." And again, I've talked about that many times. Freddie never even said the word "I have AIDS," not to a single person. He only ever said, "You probably have guessed what I'm dealing with." That's all he ever said to anyone. He never said the words "I have AIDS" to a single living soul, ladies and gentlemen. Again, all the stuff I know and the research I've done and the suspicions that I've had for a long time were really hammered home with this movie, and it's disgusting. It's fucking disrespectful is what it is. I saw one review that said that, it seemed like the film plays so fast. This is a quote from the article I read. The film plays so fast and loose with the facts that it's almost as if they had a grudge, against Freddie Mercury, and they were trying to, diss him, after death. And it's not the first time I've seen this happen. They've continually done that. So, again, I mean, I was really, really wanting to like this one. I really did. Really wanted to like the movie. But again, the musical parts were really great. But and some of the detail, some of the little details in there, I couldn't wrap my mind around that until I saw it. Why they would go through so much trouble to have so many little details right on like Freddie's house, Garden Lodge, the filmmakers were not allowed access to Garden Lodge by Mary Austin. They were not who, Freddie left everything to. So basically, from photographs and from people who'd been there and from video and stuff, they had to recreate. And I've seen tons of pictures of the inside of his house and stuff through the years. I got to tell you, I was blown away by that. You see that at the beginning of the movie, when he's waking up, and they had, the cat. I mean, even the cats, even his cats were accurate to the type of cat that he had and the color and the names. And that was, remember, I don't know if you remember in my trailer breakdown I did a few months back earlier in the year when the trailer came out. I mentioned that was my favorite part of the trailer, was the cat running across the piano. I have to say, that's probably still my favorite part of the whole movie, was the cats. That was the best part, because, Freddie had a ton of cats, and they had that detail in there, and they had the picture of Marlene Dietrich that he had in his house, which was the inspiration for the cover of the Queen 2 album. Just little stuff like that, the stuff with the technology, the truck outside of Live Aid. But this is, don't get this movie wrong. There's so little. It's like 90% fiction, maybe I'm being generous here, maybe 10% truth, maybe. And it continues to be proven to me that there has been a continuing cover-up and a continued, concerning Freddie's death, a continued cover-up that's gone on, and a continued attempt at historical revisionism, which this movie is, beyond any shadow of a doubt. And there were two specific things in this film, ladies and gentlemen, one at the beginning of the film and one at the end of the film, that, well, for me, just totally, I mean, beyond any shadow of a doubt, seal the deal on that. On any suspicions I've had in my research to Queen, there were two specific clues in this film that tied it all home. Number one, as I mentioned, the very beginning scene, when you see Freddie getting out of bed the day of Live Aid, and you see his house at Garden Lodge, you see the cats, and then they show, like, the crew unpacking road cases at Live Aid and taking all the band's instruments out. And if you blink, you'll miss it. If you blink, you'll miss this. They open a road case. They show Freddie's microphone sitting in it, and like a backstage pass, and this bottle of Stoli vodka, which I thought was a nice touch, because that was Freddie's breath. That's what Freddie drank. And so I thought that was cool. And then they open up the road case, and Brian May's red special guitar is in it. And they kind of do a camera run down the strings. And then the next thing you see is a person pushing the road case with Brian's guitar in it. And for about half a second to a second, they do a close-up shot of the roadie pushing the case with Brian May's guitar. It's funny how specifically the guy pushing the case is pushing Brian's guitar has this. And they show it on screen. I've got a screen capture of it and everything here. And you see the guy clearly has on a Masonic square and compass Freemason ring. And he's pushing Brian May's guitar. That's at the very beginning of the film. At the end of the film, the Live Aid concert ends. Then on the screen, it says, Freddie died of AIDS November 24th, 1991, blah, blah. And they're playing Queen music, and then it flashes on the screen. And this is at the very, very end of the movie, right before the credits are rolled. I've already had to sit here and stew in this goddamn lie-ridden fucking thing posing as a Freddie Mercury true story. And this is what really fucking drove it home for me, ladies and gentlemen, because, again, I can set aside, I've talked about this on the show many times. I'm a huge film fanatic. I can set aside my knowledge and my information to enjoy a film. It's not hard at all. And I was fully willing to do that with this film until it made it impossible for me to do so. And then really drove it home for me at the very end. I almost fucking fainted. You have any idea the audacity what they had to put on the fucking screen, folks? Right after it says he died in 91, blah, blah, blah. It says Freddie's funeral was held in strict accordance to Zoroastrian. His came from a Zoroastrian background. And I think I even talked about this not too long ago on the show concerning Freddie's funeral and my suspicions, the suspicious thing around it. And I'll be goddamn, folks, if they didn't put on the screen, Freddie's funeral was held in strict accordance to Zoroastrian principles, and he was cremated in accordance with their tradition. Bull fucking shit. That's the antithesis of Zoroastrian religion. Their Zoroastrian religion forbids cremation. You're actually supposed to be, it's like they, I don't remember what they call it. It's not a Viking funeral. That's where they put you on the boat and fucking light you on fire. Which is its own kind of fucking crazy and rad. But, no, basically, and I think they do this in, maybe in India or other countries, but it's also been, there's some company that does it now. You can pay to, it's like a fucking environmental, save the earth, save the planet type of fucking thing. It's supposed to be like an environmentally friendly burial where they just fucking put your corpse out in a fucking field and let the vultures eat your body and poop you out. That's how they just go. That's the Zoroastrian thing. I mean, they had the balls, Lacey, to just bolt. I sit there. I told my brother. I said, "You can confirm that that's not the case in about 2 seconds by looking at Google." Why? Number one, why the fuck is that even necessary to mention on, in titles on the screen at the end of a movie? Unless you're trying to cover up something. I couldn't believe the audacity of that. I mean, you can check that in 2 seconds. That cremation is forbidden in the Zoroastrian religion. And that's what it all nailed it all home for me. I had suspected for some time that Brian May was a Freemason. Listen, it's a lot bigger in England and stuff than it is here in the United States, especially in the upper echelons of politics and the music industry and the record labels and everything over there. And I've talked about many times on the show. I've talked about the threefold stages of man. It's it's referred to as different things, but like a lot of different religions and there's lots of different versions of this throughout religions of the world, but it's the main tenet of what they call Blue Lodge Masonry, which is how you see the local Masonic lodges, little mob, or little small. Well, the Blue Lodge Masons, see, it only goes up to 3 degrees. Apprentice, Adept, and Master Mason. That's it. There's only 3 degrees in regular Blue Lodge Masonry. And most people who become Masons don't ever go any farther than that. And certainly to get into any level where you're going to get any of the real knowledge in Freemasonry, you have to go beyond the Blue Lodge. But the majority of people worldwide who are Masons are not. And I've talked about, and I've featured it in my films and talked about this lodge in Guthrie, Oklahoma. world's largest. You can see it in the film Rain Man. And it's the only place in the world where you can go there and they can put you through it in a weekend. But you can go there and become a Scottish Rite or a York Rite. I think there's 17 degrees in York Rite and 32 in Scottish Rite Masonry. And in this lodge, they have this stained glass window that depicts the threefold stages of man: the apprentice, the adept, and the master mason, or the child, the adult, and the old man. And they have these stained glass windows that depict that inside that lodge in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And they tell you, when you go on the tour, about how they can't even insure these things because they're priceless. That's how rare they are. And a lot of researchers like myself and others, it took me years to figure out. I, like many people, watched Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey so many times. And it wasn't until after I learned and had started researching this kind of stuff and started researching into secret societies and specifically researching Masonry and the different degrees and what they believe in and all this stuff, and also researching secret societies, ancient societies. And so 2001: A Space Odyssey, beyond any shadow of a doubt, is about, people always wonder what the movie's about. It's about the threefold stages of man. And I haven't mentioned this. I haven't talked about this on the show or even brought this up because I've been sitting on this clip. And I was going to wait and wait till I put it in one of the films or something to talk about it. But since we're on the subject now, I will mention what it is. I have this clip where Brian May admits, ladies and gentlemen, and explicitly describes it. This I got to tell you, this really blew me away. Because as a Queen fan, as somebody who, I know every word to every song they've ever done. I'm not kidding you. I don't need to. Maybe I might be able to. I couldn't even do that with Rush. You could probably get me on Rush because I would say there's probably 5 or 6 songs probably out of Rush and stuff I may not know every word to, but not Queen. You could pick randomly any song you want to pick off any album, and I could recite the entire song, the lyrics and everything to you, just right off the top of my head. But I was shocked when I heard Brian May admit in this clip that the song "We Will Rock You" is about the threefold stages of man. And as soon as I heard him say that, and I thought about the lyrics, holy shit. You go read the lyrics, or just think of the lyrics in your head. Buddy, you're a young man, hard man, chatting in the street, think on the world. And then there's three verses. And the first verse is the apprentice. The second verse is the adept. And the third verse is the master mason, and the third verse, he says, buddy, you're an old man, hard man. I mean, that's, and Brian May admits that. And so I went, wait a minute. Are you trying to tell me that? So 2001: A Space Odyssey and fucking the song "We Will Rock You" are about the same thing? That fucking blew my brains out, man. One of the other interesting things they had in this Guthrie Lodge, they had a whole room dedicated to the Assyrians. And it was under construction at the time, but the guy, we told him we came from Dallas, so he took us in there and let us see it anyway. And he was like, well, why are you so interested in seeing this room? And I was like, well, I'm just interested to know why you guys would have a whole room dedicated to a civilization that predates Masonry by thousands of years. And that's when he just couldn't believe I knew the shit I do. And he was like, well, wait a second, let me go see if I can get the keys. And he did. He went and let us in there and stuff. They had all these depictions of Nurgle and stuff in there. And the song, you know, the famous song from 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? And you know what the name of that? A lot of people know that song. You know, the dun 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 dun. You know, everybody knows that. But do you know what the name of that song is? I had to look it up. It's like it also spoke Zarathustra. Or also spak. There, basically, it may be a weird translation, but it's something like, you know, also spoke, or thus spoke Zarathustra, or thus spoke Zarathustra. That's what it is. Which I believe is taken from I believe it was from a book written by Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, I believe. But my point is, Zarathustra is who? Like, thus spoke Zarathustra. Well, who is Zarathustra? Zarathustra is Zoroaster. So you can see, if you saw my Bowie series and I show the Kubrick connection stuff there, and you think about that, I mean, it's just fucking mind blowing. I mean, here's Brian May admitting "We Will Rock You" is about a Masonic. I mean, that's a Masonic ideology, and you know, here's "We Will Rock You" that's about that, and then 2001: A Space Odyssey is also about that, and the theme song is "Thus Spoke Zarathustra," and yeah, it's just wild. The again, Freddie being his family being strict Zoroastrians, and there were all kinds of little hints in this movie too about it. There was a definite specific hint in there that also confirmed to me, not that I had any doubts, but confirmed to me what the true meaning of Bohemian Rhapsody is. So with the Masonic ring at the beginning and the thing at the end talking about, you know, this, he was cremated in strict accordance to Zoroaster. I mean, that it all came home for me. That and the complete lies in this movie. Again, I talked about, you know, Freddie and Brian and Roger. They already knew it, you know, and the way it's depicted in the film didn't happen that way. I'll tell you what, if I was doing this movie, this is how I would do it. Scene 1, Act 1, the first thing you would have saw, if this was my Freddie Mercury movie, if I was making a Queen Freddie Mercury movie, the first fucking scene would not be him waking up on the day of Live Aid coughing. How fucking dumb is that? Worst intro to a fucking, I mean, my God. And again, that's the thing is, like it said in some of those articles I read about, it seemed like they're, you know, like they had a grudge, like they were trying to, you know, defame a dead man. And I got to tell you, I mean, of all of the ways you could have opened a movie, the first thing you open with is a reminder of, you know, his illness or whatever. That's the way you open a movie about the mighty Freddie Mercury, is with him waking up in bed coughing. I think pretty much, I don't know, pretty much as soon as I saw that, I was done. I was like, okay, this is, you know, come on. The first fucking scene, Act 1, Scene 1, should have been London, 1968, 22-year-old art student Freddie Mercury, Freddie Bulsara, wasn't even Freddie Mercury yet. He sees Jimi Hendrix live on stage. Jimi Hendrix makes eye contact with him from the stage. And at that moment, this is a true story, folks. And as soon as that happens and he makes that connection with Freddie from the stage to him in the audience, he immediately leaves the concert, goes home, and, you know, starts writing songs and forms a band. anything else you want to have after that for the rest of the film, including the Live Aid thing, that's why the Live Aid thing performance is considered the top greatest live performance of all time. It certainly wasn't because it was a flawless performance, because it was not a flawless performance. There were, flubs and mishaps through that whole performance. If you really listen closely, there's flubs all through it. There's a couple times where John Deacon hits bad notes on the bass, real bad, hits the wrong notes. Freddie's voice was not in good shape. There was a bad drum fill in Bohemian Rhapsody by Roger, a bad one. He goes, and you could just hear this bad missed fill. The ending of Hammer to Fall was completely botched. Freddie went to the very end where he goes, "How you waiting for the hammer to fall?" It's supposed to go, more time. And it was, the end of that was completely botched. They had, there was issues. It wasn't a perfect performance, but it's not considered the greatest live performance of all time because it was a flawless performance. That's not why. And the other thing is too, again, they make it out in the movie like, he tells them he has AIDS right before they're about to play Live Aid. Bullshit. And Roger says, "Oh, we haven't even played together in years. We're gonna make fools of ourselves." That's a complete lie. Queen had just finished a tour in May of 1985, like a month and a half before Live Aid happened. And Freddie's voice was toast. There's not a lot of footage in concerts. There's some crap quality stuff, but there aren't that many high quality pieces of footage from the Works tour. I think there's one maybe from Japan and one maybe from Australia, I think, out there. But it's one of my favorite set lists of any tour that they did, because aside from the super early stuff, because for the first time since the early days on that tour, they went back and revisited some of the stuff from the first couple of albums. They did Liar off the first album. They did Keep Yourself Alive. And, those Freddie was singing in a completely different way back in those early days. So on that tour, they were doing that. So his voice was wrecked. And he was advised by his doctor not to sing. Not because he had AIDS or, were suffering. It had nothing to do with that. But they try to hammer that home in the film that, he's against all odds, he's got AIDS and he's going out and giving this killer performance because he found out he doesn't have long to live. Complete and utter fabrication. And they also act like, Freddie fucked her. He was too busy fucking around and having gay sex and snorting coke to tell anybody if he wanted to play at Live Aid or not. And, their manager is like, "Well, I'll have to call, I called Bob Geldof and, he's going to see if he can squeeze you in, but he has to have an answer today." Horse shit. Horse shit. You know why we know that's horse shit? Because Big Nuts asshole Geldof, do you realize that motherfucker didn't even have, when he announced the lineup for Live Aid, he didn't even have 10% of the people on the bill even confirmed yet. This is no lie. You can watch the press conference of it. He was on the press conference going, "Yeah, we're going to have this band and this band and this band and this group." None of these people had confirmed this. And the Who had been broken up at that time because Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey hated each other, still hate each other. And he's like, and he just goes on there saying, the Who are getting back together to play this. They fucking hadn't been contacted or it was bullshit. He had none of these people confirmed, and Queen was one of them. Queen were on the lineup on the announced lineup for the Live Aid show before they were even confirmed. But in the movie, they say, oh, the lineup's already set, Freddie, and, Queen's not on her. Absolutely not true. Not true at all. God, I mean, there's so many things. There was one part where they were having like an argument or something, and Freddie's like, I've got to, I want to do something different, and, what's that song, like your song says, John? What's your song? Oh, Spread My Wings? Yeah, Spread My Wings. I need to spread my wings. The song is called Spread Your Wings, not Spread My Wings. Queen didn't have a song. I mean, that kind of stuff like that, and I've seen the people, believe there are a ton of, people are loving this movie. And I've already been in flame wars, leaving comments on Facebook and stuff. People don't want, people just pissed off if you say you don't like this movie and mad because you don't like this movie. It's ridiculous, and it's lies front to back, and it has an agenda front to back. And the way that they, they act like the band, it's just so hilarious. Poor John Deacon, man. John Deacon's an interesting character because John Deacon, the bass player of Queen, completely became a recluse after Freddie died. And, everybody's entitled to live their life the way they want to live it. But John Deacon, let me tell you, John Deacon knows something. I believe beyond any shadow of doubt, John Deacon knows the real truth about Freddie's death. He knows the real truth of how all that stuff went down. And because he has not only become a recluse, I mean, if you go up to him and go, hey, you're John Deacon, he'll just tell you to fuck off, maybe fucking punch you. He will go berserk. He don't even want anybody to even recognize him or even acknowledge to him, to his face, that they know who he is. And the guy's a multimillionaire, and he still lives in the same tiny little house that he bought when Queen first got some money. And they portray, and I tell you, even though he's not dead, it really seems like they went out of their way to sort of defame not only Freddie, but also John. They made John seem like a bumbling, dumb idiot. They gave him the worst dialogue and didn't give him hardly anything to say. They didn't tell his story. Him and Freddie were super close. In fact, I suspect, and I have suspected for many, many years, as a lot of people have, I suspect that John Deacon is actually gay. If you're like, oh, he's married, had 4 kids, listen, the guy's gay. I'm here to tell you right now, John Deacon is gay. And I think him and Freddie had some kind of, I mean, they didn't even get close to telling the stuff with Freddie, especially with like how they speed up the timeline. They show them like on his birthday and they're all together, and they show him coming up with the name Freddie Mercury in front of his parents, which totally didn't happen. And then getting a call from John Reed. Like this all happened all at the same time or something. They completely disregarded Queen's early record deal and early management and the whole thing that went down with that. That's when it all happened. When Queen was signed with the Sheffield Brothers, when they recorded their first album, the first self-titled Queen album, they had a meeting with management, and the meeting with the management at the time said, look, Freddie Bulsara, that's not a very rock star name. You need to come up with something more than that. So that's when he came up with the name Mercury, and they changed it. They also, at that time, I never really know why they did this, other than maybe some of the songs on that first album. The first, as I've talked about the second Queen album a lot, but the first Queen album is an interesting thing. If you really listen to Freddie's music, he was hinting at the Zoroastrian thing not almost, all the way through all the albums from beginning to the end of their career. And a lot of people, some people believe like Zoroaster was actually Jesus, and the stories of Jesus were based on Zoroaster, and some people believe that. And there's a song on the first Queen album called Jesus. And you ask yourself, why would a guy who's a Zoroastrian, why would he write a song about Jesus? It doesn't make any sense, right? And so the management also made that decision at that time, for whatever reason, to call John Deacon Deacon John on the first album. And if you listen to the very first ever Queen recording, live recording, I think it's from 1973 or 74, maybe 73. And I believe it's like a BBC radio announcer. He's announcing all the how they introduce all the members of the band. Roger Taylor on drums, Brian May on guitar, Deacon John on the bass. And then they quickly changed it. And I got to tell you, as a researcher, as a Queen historian, I found there basically no information on why they called John Deacon John for a while. Never found any explanation for that. And they had no mention of the David Bowie thing. I think everybody was expecting there to be at least like a 10-second clip or something with them recording with David Bowie. I mean, it's a big, huge, important part of the story. And they didn't. And listen, I understand this movie was plagued with problems. Production, it was in production hell for well over a decade. They had, everybody, it's well documented the problems they had. The Sacha Baron Cohen thing at the beginning, and then they had another guy come in, and then finally they settled on Rami Malek as Freddie. I mean, there was problems, and then of course Bryan Singer, the director, quit, and you can definitely tell the parts that Bryan Singer directed, and best I can gather from the information I've read on the internet and looking at the stuff, and it seems that the majority of the stuff that he did was really only the live performance of the Live Aid thing was done first. They filmed and made the Live Aid thing. That was the very first thing they did before they shot anything else of the movie. And I saw some stuff that Bryan Singer had posted before he quit from the live performance stuff, so I know he did all that. You can definitely tell that he, basically did all of the, and it was his project, so he had probably done all the research. And then whoever the guy was they brought in to finish the film after they got rid of him, probably didn't have as much information and didn't know Queen the way. And yeah, that could be it, but that doesn't fly when you look at all the other blatant lies and stuff that was in this film. There really is no excuse for it or any other explanation other than, they were trying to change the historical stuff. They make it seem like John Reed and Paul Printer come on the scene, and immediately that's when Freddie's gay stuff starts. Freddie was already doing gay stuff before Paul Printer came on the scene, and John Reed was only associated with the band from like 75 to 77, like 2 years. In the movie, he's with them for like 10 years, if that didn't happen that way. In fact, Killer Queen, the song Killer Queen is about a guy. It's not about a woman. It's about a guy. It was a guy that worked for EMI Records, one of Freddie's early, no, Freddie was doing the gay stuff long before that. And they certainly didn't mention any of John Reed's stuff. I mean, John Reed, he was Elton's boy for many years. And when I say boy, I don't just mean he was his longtime manager. Him and John Reed and Elton John were butt buddies for many years. I remember the part in the film where they were talking about Jim Beach, their lawyer who became their manager. And there's a thing where Freddie says, no, we can't call you Jim Beach. We got to call you Miami. That was like the first thing in the film where I was like, oh my God, there's something factual in this film. Like, seriously, everything up until that is pretty much not based in fact. So, but that was, but I got to tell you, listen, everybody there was a lot of gays within the organization of Queen. I mean, John Reed was gay. Jim, Miami Beach. I mean, they kind of, I guess, a little bit. They kind of hinted at it, when they're with Mike Myers' office, and he's like, nobody likes opera. And Jim Beach is like, I like opera. John Reed's like, I like opera. You're like, okay, yeah, of course the gay guys like it, but it just they're firing John Reed because Freddie wants to go solo, or it totally didn't happen that way. The solo thing didn't even happen until 1984, 85 is when it came out. John Reed was well out of the picture before then, but he was still friends. There's actually footage of, and this is another thing, the whole thing in the movie where Freddie's having the party, and the band members are all, oh, Freddie, this is crap, and they're all leaving. Look, man, bullshit. Like, make it out like Freddie was the wild partying guy, and the rest of the guys in the band were just angels. Bullshit, man. Queen as an organization, Queen as a whole, were fucking through legendary parties, ladies and gentlemen, that are still talked about in the industry to this day because nobody threw better parties than Queen as a band. There's footage of these things. They were so insane, they had cameras rolling at these things. And yes, all that shit about the dwarves walking around with bowls on their heads full of cocaine, all that, they'll deny it up and down, but it really did happen. There's people there, there's pictures of it. They had dwarves and naked lady mud wrestling, and, those weren't Freddie parties. Those were Queen parties that they put on as a band, and there are photos and video of them at these parties. There's footage, I think it was Freddie's 39th birthday in Munich. You could see footage of that. And you can see the other members of Queen come, and they're there with their wives, and they're having fun, and everybody else there. I mean, you could tell it's a gay fest, and fucking, you could see John Reed in there. He's dressed up in women's clothes with a fucking woman's hat on, and Miami Beach is over there. Yeah. But that was the other thing they don't mention. Freddie had a lot more lovers and a lot more people than they even got close to putting in the movie. But it showed us what he did in real life as far as that showed the side to him, because every time he went through guys and, went from guy to guy to guy and, this, that, and the other. And most of the time, these guys he would pick would always be nobodies. These would be fucking guys working at gas stations and shit, and they would get involved with Freddie, and he would completely upend their lives, They would have to quit their jobs, and they'd be traveling with him, and, they just their lives would be uprooted and taken away, and that's why he didn't stay with anyone very long. But a lot of these guys that he was with, he would give them jobs within the organization because, he uprooted their lives and they quit their jobs and stuff. So he had a bunch of guys in his entourage who were former lovers who became part of his entourage and a part of his work. Like there was one guy that was from America. And after they broke up, Freddie made him his personal chef, gave him a job in the orders. He did that with a lot of these guys. And, I just couldn't believe they didn't have any mention of the David Bowie thing. And anybody who knows anything about Queen would know how inexplicably linked David Bowie and Queen are. And that's the other thing they show them when they're meeting with John Reed, and Paul Printer's there and they first get introduced, and he says, oh, maybe you can get us on Top of the Pops. They had already been on Top of the Pops before John Reed was even in the picture. They got on Top of the Pops for the first time with the song 7 Seas of Rye. And that became their first hit and their first charting single. But check this out. Guess why they got on Top of the Pops for the first time? It wasn't because of John Reed. It was because David Bowie was supposed to appear, and he canceled at the last minute. And Queen had been trying to get on Top of the Pops. They called Queen in. They did a mimed performance of Seven Seas of Rye. And that's what propelled the band to become what they became. And it was all because David Bowie canceled. But see, that's the other thing that, there was when they're meeting with John Reed or about to, and Freddie walks up and Brian says, "Oh, you look like an angry lizard, Freddie, with that crap you've got on or whatever." Bullshit, man. Total bullshit. They were wearing that fruity shit too. Go look at the fucking first two Queen albums. Look at the shit that they're wearing on the back cover of the first Queen album. Open up the gatefold to Queen 2 and look at how they've all got on the fucking fur and listen, that time period that Queen broke out of was the height of the original glam rock scene. They came out of that scene with T-Rex and Roxy Music and Sparks and Gary Glitter. And it wasn't, it was the first sort of gender bender thing that was going on. But it wasn't so much the gay thing like it would later become at that time. You know what I mean? You had guys wearing women's clothes and it wasn't a gay thing. It was just the glam rock thing that was going on. So there's plenty of footage, man, where all the guys at Queen are all wearing some fruity looking shit. But here they are in the movie portraying like, "Oh, Freddie, look at you. You look like an angry lizard." Give me a fucking break, man. Those guys wouldn't have said that kind of shit. Because they had Xandra Rhodes designed. You've seen Brian May's got that where he's wearing that white. It looks like it's like wings. It's like a white winged outfit. All those clothes were designed by Xandra Rhodes. Xandra Rhodes was a female clothes designer. But in the movie, they just act like that's non-existent. Like Queen didn't come out and ride the wave of the glam rock wave. At that time, they absolutely did. And so, David Bowie canceling his appearance on Top of the Pops and Queen taking his spot is what propelled them. And then that was what would make that scene later on in the film where they meet up in Montreux, Switzerland while they're recording the Hot Space album, and Bowie happened to be living there at the time, and they were having dinner, and they said, "Oh, let's go mess around in the studio and see what we can come up with." That would have made that all the more poignant. Another thing that would have been great to do, too, would have been while they were recording News of the World and We Will Rock You, Sid Vicious from the Sex Pistols were recording their one and only album in the same studio next door. And comes over and talks some shit, to Freddie, and Freddie calls him Simon Ferocious and pushed him out the fucking door and told him to fuck off. And then what happened? Well, when punk rock first broke and the Sex Pistols first broke, it was considered to be the antithesis of bands like Queen, who were now overnight considered dinosaurs. But here's what's crazy about it. The same thing that happened with Top of the Pops with David Bowie and Queen happened with Queen and the Sex Pistols. David Bowie cancels his appearance. Queen takes his spot, and boom, they're on the charts overnight for the first time. Queen was set to appear on Top of the Pops. They canceled. Guess who took their place? The Sex Pistols. And boom, that was the rise of punk rock. And they even had a song, Roger had a song on the album, Sheer Heart Attack, which he'd had around for many years. 3 or 4 years before that. I mean, listen to the song fucking Stone Cold Crazy off of the Sheer Heart Attack album. And that's the beginning of fucking thrash metal right there. I mean, nobody was doing anything that heavy and fast in 1973. Just nobody. But there's all kinds of little things like that, things where you could have had callbacks to other things that happened later. Oh, what else? Oh, there was a scene where they were recording Bohemian Rhapsody, and they've got a Shure SM7B microphone. It's the same microphone I use. Well, I'm not using it now. Actually, coincidentally enough, yesterday I've had that microphone. I had a Shure SM7B microphone. Love that microphone. I had it for 9 years. It's been a grateful service. Yesterday it fucking broke. That fucking sucks. But anyway, that microphone, the SM7, the first SM7 came out in the mid 70s, and it was primarily created for voice, for voiceovers, radio, stuff like that. And it became famous because the engineer on Michael Jackson's Thriller album used it on Michael Jackson's voice on that album. That's what made that microphone become big. But then in like the early 2000s, they came out with the SM7B, which is the newer version of that. So in the movie, they've got this microphone that didn't come out till 2001 sitting there on his, I guess that may not mean anything to anybody else, but to me, it was just like, come on. You got all these historically accurate things. You're going to put a microphone that didn't come out till 2001 on there. It's in the thing where Freddie's in the fucking press conference and he says, "Oh, my parents died in a fiery wreck." He never said that. He never. That's like he's Jim Morrison. Remember Jim Morrison did that? So that what they made up a Jim Morrison thing when Jim Morrison told the reporters, remember his family's dead and they weren't dead. He just said he did that so nobody would find out his dad was was Admiral Morrison, the guy that created the false flag Gulf of Tonkin thing that caused the Vietnam War. Of course he didn't. I mean, he didn't want anybody to find out, him being this, hippie counterculture guy, that his dad was the guy that created the event that sparked Vietnam. Yeah, Freddie never said that. Their wives in the studio when they're recording We Will Rock You, and the Queen never had their wives hanging out in the recording studio, and they certainly weren't in the studio when they were recording that record. We know that because there's footage. But yeah, I just couldn't believe, how they were trying to make the band seem like they were all goody two-shoes and never partied or were bullshit. Dude, those guys were doing coke. John Deacon was such a fucking alcoholic drunk. John Deacon had his own full bar, ladies and gentlemen, set up on the side of the stage every show. If you ever notice, you ever watch Queen live, you'll see John Deacon is always situated on the same side as Freddie Mercury, right by his piano. And you'll notice if you watch some of the concerts, specifically like the Montreal concert, you'll see they have road cases and stuff on that side of the stage where John Deacon's bass rig is and where Freddie Mercury's piano is located. And they've got road cases that kind of block the view. And you'll notice sometimes whenever they do something where like Freddie's on the piano or, Brian's playing guitar or, a drum solo or whatever, and you'll see John Deacon walk off, he'll walk off the stage and walk back on, and he'll walk over behind the road cases. Well, behind those road cases, he had a full fucking bar, and I mean a full bar, ladies and gentlemen. Every kind of fucking liquor you can fucking imagine. So that whatever he felt like at any time, and he just would have a roadie over there mixing cocktails the whole show. And Roger was, those guys were fucking partying hard, just as much as anybody was. And, they were they were all, cheating on their wives, and they've all talked. None of this stuff is conspiracy or I mean, these guys have talked about this openly in interviews before. All of this stuff. They've admitted to this. In fact, at one of the parties they had, it may have been, I think it was in Munich, Germany. This is one of the Queen parties. This is not a Freddie Mercury party. This is a fucking Queen party. They hired they bought, check this shit out. They bought out a brothel for a party. There was a brothel Queen went in and paid all the women half price, got all the women from this brothel to come to their party, and paid all the women half of whatever their rate was. So then anybody at the party could fuck whatever prostitute they wanted to fuck, and they'd only have to pay half of whatever the person was asking, whatever the lady was asking for. And meanwhile, they're all married. It's a come on. So many fucking things. And, fat bottom girls. They're doing fat bottom girls when they've still got the long hair, and then it's supposed to be like 1974, 75. They're doing a song that didn't come out until 78. Just like I talked about the Tupac movie where he's doing, Hail Mary, which he never performed live. Oh, man, what else? Yeah, they jumped from the hot space. The hot space release, it was supposed to be like a press conference for the hot space thing, and Freddie's like all on drugs and saying all this weird shit. None of that ever happened. He says something about, he asked some lady reporter, does that thing between your legs bite? Freddie would never fucking say that. In a million years would he never say that. And he's all like fucked up and doesn't know where he's, I maybe saw one interview, I think, where Freddie maybe had a buzz on one time, but you can watch he was never fucked up in interviews. He never was rude. And it's just the way they portray it. And not only that, but like, the stuff with him and Mary, and they don't even mention the fact that Mary was not the only woman that Freddie was involved with. Freddie was involved with a woman in Munich, Germany in 1984. He was in a relationship with a woman in 1984, ladies and gentlemen, well after he had already, been into the gay scene and all that stuff. No mention that. They don't mention the fact that he had an apartment in New York in the early 1980s. Freddie lived in New York, that was right there where all the gay bars and stuff were at. Lived in New York for a period of time. They skip over the whole genesis of the song Crazy Little Thing Called Love and don't give that song any love in the movie at all, which is an important part of the story because Freddie wrote that song in the bathtub in 3 minutes as a tribute to Elvis. It was their first number one song, and John Lennon went on the record and said that when he heard Crazy Little Thing Called Love, it inspired him to want to make music again. That's when he did the album Double Fantasy right before he died. He hadn't been inactive for 7 or 8 years, and he heard Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and that's what got him playing music again. I heard they did shoot a scene where Freddie writes it in the bathtub. They cut it out of the movie. And they actually did shoot, because they don't show all the songs of Live Aid. They cut out Crazy Little Thing Called Love and We Will Rock You from the Live Aid performance of the movie, but they did film those songs. They went from firing losing their singer and their bass player, to immediately, being fully formed with John Deacon when they had like 7 bass players before him. They just moved stuff around the timeline, and they embellished stuff and made up stuff that there's absolutely zero proof Freddie ever said, just to continue their narrative. And the whole thing where Freddie's telling the band that he wants to go solo, and it's like, I need a break, and I've got to do this. Look, they were totally, that's just horseshit. The band was 100% behind Freddie doing a solo album. It was not a point of contention. The one thing they did get right with that in the film, in his solo album being a point of contention, there was a point of contention with how much money he got. And in the movie, they show it like, Paul Printer supposedly was working this deal, and then he took it to John Reed, and then he made it seem like John Reed was going behind Freddie's back, so then he fired John Reed. Well, John Reed, was already out of the picture by then, so it didn't remotely happen like that. Miami Beach, He's the one that engineered the whole solo album thing with CBS Records, because Freddie had been hanging out with Michael Jackson. He was a huge Queen fan, and Michael Jackson had been coming to the LA Forum to see him live, and he'd come out and hung out in the studio with him while they were recording stuff, and he heard him playing Another One Bites the Dust or something, and later on he asked him, hey, what about that Another One Bites the Dust song, man? Are you guys going to put that out? And they were like, oh, no, probably not even going to put it on the album, much less put it out as a single. And Michael said, no, you got to put it out. That's a number one. That's a number one record, guaranteed. And, Michael, they're like, what the fuck does Michael Jackson know? He's 25 years old. We're in our 30s. But Michael Jackson had been in the fucking music industry longer than they had. And he was 100% right. It was they put that song, it was still their biggest hit. But him and Michael had been hanging out. Freddie was actually supposed to be on Thriller. He was supposed to be on the song State of Shock or something like that, but it ended up being Mick Jagger on it with him. But basically, CBS Records had all that Thriller money. And if you know anything about the music industry, really not this way anymore, but the way it used to be back in those days is that if you saw a record label that had a big successful hit, like a Rumors or Eagles Hotel California, whatever, AC/DC back in Atlantic, when you had one of those record labels have a big hit, that was the time to go at them for money or try to get a new band signed or something, or try to get your band signed when they were flush with cash, because if they were making so much, record labels were making so much money, they didn't give a shit. So that's what Miami Beach, not John Reed, he took advantage of the fact that they were awash in cash, and he negotiated a deal for Freddie Mercury's solo album. And in the movie, they're, how much, Freddie? How much did you get? And he's like, I want to know how much you got. Roger Taylor's like, how much you get? And he's like, $4 million. And they freak out. That's an inaccurate number. Maybe that was, I don't know, maybe that was the deal. Maybe it was a $4 million record deal. I don't know, but I know for a fact, because they mentioned this in the documentary, he got an advance on his first solo record from CBS Records of $10 million. Way leaps and bounds more than Queen were getting as a band for their record advances. So they were upset because, if that album was a hit, there'd be no reason for there to be Queen anymore. But listen, there was no contention about Freddie doing a solo record at all. They were fully supportive of him doing a solo record. He wasn't doing that, against the wishes of the band. In fact, Roger Taylor's on his solo album. Roger Taylor is on that first solo album. He appears on it. He in one of his videos for The Great Pretender, Roger's in it dressed as a woman. So that whole thing that, they were against him having a solo, they all did solo records. Roger Taylor put out 2 solo records before Freddie ever did one. Brian May did his little Starfleet project thing with like the anime music and stuff with Eddie Van Halen on there and a bunch of other guys. So that was all made up. The scene that cracked me up, this is when another part of the movie when I knew they were trying to, stick a dead man with swords, was when they show Freddie recording his solo album and they show the band in there that he had or whatever. And they look like a bunch of retards, like banging on like an electronic drum kit, looking like they're trying to figure out how to play their instruments. He had like top-notch studio guys in there. And a lot of that stuff was done with an orchestra and stuff too. Come on. Here they are, trying to make it seem like, oh, here's Freddie in the studio with a bunch of retards or something. And a lot of that stuff was drum machines and synths and stuff mostly anyway. And not only that, but later on, when they later did the Made in Heaven album that came out in 95, which consisted of tracks that were recorded after the Innuendo sessions, and some of the songs on there were recorded right up until he died. If you ever want to hear the very last song Freddie ever recorded, the very, very last thing he ever recorded, a mere week or two before he died, it's the song Mother Love off of the Made in Heaven album. And, oh my God, man, he does this, the middle part of the song, that out in the city, in the cold world outside. He just does this fucking, the singing is just, it's just insane. You're like, the guy was literally on death's bed when he sang that. Literally, he was on death's bed. And you can't believe it. And it's crazy because he put in that amazing vocal performance on that song, Mother Love. But he started feeling bad the day he was recording it. So he didn't get to finish the song. The song was written by Brian May. And it's heavy, man, when you hear it, because when you hear that last verse, Brian May is singing that last verse, and you realize this was not just a creative, artistic thing. Brian May singing that last verse in that song because Freddie died before he got to sing that last verse, and so you could hear it. You can hear that. Oh man, it's heavy, man. You can hear it in Brian's voice when he sings that third verse in that song, because he's just, the tone of it, the tone of his voice, you can just tell. You know, that's the reason why he's singing it, because Freddie just wasn't there to sing it. But on that Made in Heaven album, they took some of the songs. See, that's the great thing about the fact that Freddie recorded those solo albums with drum machines and stuff, because the tempos are, locked in. So you can go in and take all those tracks off the multi-track tape, and you can pull those drum machines off and just use them as like a click track and record real drums. And that's what they did. So a song like Made in Heaven, there were a couple of the ones that were recorded in that time period. Let Me Live, that was another one that he was supposed to do. It was supposed to be a duet with Rod Stewart for a solo, and they didn't finish it. So Queen took the tracks that Freddie didn't finish, and they went back in. It's the only song where Brian, Roger, and Freddie, all three individually sing. It's called Let Me Live. It's on Made in Heaven, where they all three sing a verse to it. It's fantastic what they did with this album. And this was, 95. You didn't have Pro Tools and stuff yet. They did have digital editing and stuff, but it was real slow. But it was that was the first thing of its kind where someone had done a whole record of someone's voice that was, done after their death. My point is, on that record, there's several songs that they make into Queen songs, and that was the whole thing of why Freddie Mercury's solo album was completely unnecessary anyway. It was completely unnecessary. He could have just done those songs with Queen. But again, it shows that there was no acrimony about him doing a solo record, and it's not like they hated that music, because they ended up making those into Queen songs that were recorded for a solo album later anyway. I mentioned on one of the previous shows, the Live Aid thing where Trip Califf, their audio sound engineer, turned the limiters off. In the movie, they've got Jim Beach, the manager, doing it, which of course that didn't happen. No mention of the fact that Brian May and Mary, I believe this is one of the reasons why Brian and Freddie didn't get along. And of course, they didn't mention that in the film. Brian and Mary were a couple. And then, later Freddie got involved with her and everything. And I think Brian had, and I think you can hear it in some of the songs, like the song She Makes Me off of the Sheer Heart Attack album. I think Brian had feelings that was a major part of their contention. Oh, and Freddie comes in the movie and he's got like the mustache on or whatever. And Brian May says something like, "Oh, we're a rock band, Freddie. We're not the Village People." He would never have fucking said that. But at the same time, that's where Freddie got that look from. He got it from the dude from the Village People, the cop in the Village People. He admitted that. I could go on and on. Already been doing an hour and 40 minutes here. Listen, it's filled with lies front to back. This in no way, shape, or form. When I hear the band make statements like this is the definitive story of Freddie Mercury, it makes me want to vomit. Here's my soundbite, sound quote that wraps this whole movie up to me. You ready for it? Get a pen. This is my new t-shirt. Get a pen, get a marker, get something, write this down. You ready? Here it comes. You can quote me on this. Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, sucked more dick than Freddie Mercury. Boom! That's a lot of dick. Damn, that's a lot of dick. That is a lot of dick. It sucked more dick than Freddie Mercury. God damn, that's a lot of dick. Mark it down, put it down. Listen. The last 20 minutes are great. The Live Aid scene, it really is incredible. It really is an amazing piece of film work. I got to give it up. But the rest of it, it's historical revisionism. And I feel even more compelled now to tell the real truth in a documentary or something of Freddie Mercury and Queen and do it myself. God damn it. I always got to do it. All right, folks. Take care.